Welcome, everyone. Another episode of Financial 15. Kevin and I are ready to go. You can see all of our notes, lots of data, as well as sharing a few of our experiences all about retirement. We're going to go through 3 unexpected challenges of retirement. You definitely want to stick around.
Yes, it's the one thing at the end of the life force of work that you really want to look forward to is retirement. You think everything's going to be rosy and glorious, but there are actually challenges going into retirement and when you are in there. And these are things that we need to define. So if you want to find out more about this topic or any of the other ones we've done on our Financial 15, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Quick and simple. Click the button, you're ready to go. Or like us on Facebook. And most importantly, please visit our website at beckerorr.com. Lots of great content, blogs, videos, events. We cover the whole 9 yards. You should have a great time with it. But today we are talking about the 3 unexpected challenges of retirement. Now, there are a variety, but these ones need to be tackled. And again, as Clint's mentioned beforehand, not doing it in any order, but Clint, what is the first one that we really should look at?
It's a list, right? Not a ranking. It's not as if one's worse
right.
than the other. It's simply just 3 items through our experience and with a bit of data that we think people might not expect in retirement. And one of them is being able to stay busy, right? Often in retirement, when we're working, we think, oh, retirement's going to be fantastic. We're on the golf course every day. We got this big to-do list of things that we wanted to get to. Well, it's always been busy working. We'll tackle all that list. And then usually in retirement, you get that first maybe 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and then you get bored. That to-do list is done, and you're trying to redefine your roles, your activities, and you have a whole new phase of what you have to do to stay busy, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I mean, I know already that my wife's got the honey-do list, as it's called, for things that I need to get done quick in that first 6 months of time frame. I may have 3 weeks to enjoy, and then it's up to that. But if I do not have a plan after that, now what am I going to do? Last thing you want to do is just be stuck in front of the TV watching it and everything else. Do you have hobbies? Are you involved with charities? I mean, do you want to fully retire? Are you doing something part-time that you want to do that you were doing, or do you want to find something part-time that you weren't doing? You need to look at what you've got going forward and look at things to stay busy. I mean, that could be dealing with your grandkids if you have that aspect, or hanging out with your family, or if you've got a group of golf buddies that are going out twice a week. But one thing you got to know is what you're doing staying busy. Isn't that most important, Clint?
Yeah, that is key. And everyone's going to be a little different here. And this is just through our experience, some anecdotes. We find folks that have lots of hobbies and a big social life prior don't have any issue staying busy in retirement, because that kind of carries through. And if someone is perhaps more involved in work in the sense where it's a bigger part of their identity, maybe it's self-employed, they're running a business, so it takes up a big chunk of their time, effort, and energy. Well, it could be harder to make that adjustment in retirement because they maybe don't have as many hobbies or as many of those extra social activities outside of the work environment. So that's really the tip, is to think about it. Do they go through, think seriously before retirement? What are the hobbies, charities, the family, grandkids? And it can be part-time work as well, but finding a way to maintain that social structure, to maintain those activities so that you can continue to be busy and have a purposeful and fulfilling retirement. That's really the first challenge. We call it staying busy. There's a tip to help you tackle that. Challenge number 2 here, Kevin, this is an emotional one, is that for years, since we're young, we're told save money, spend less than you make, and put it away for a rainy day for retirement. And then in retirement, after decades of that training of building that habit, we're told to do the exact opposite. And that is difficult. That is a hard turn to make.
It is. And like I said, I've been preaching to my kids, B and my wife are both in the financial industry, so they're really screwed off the top to say, save your money. Look at what you need to do for retirement. These are things that have to go forward. But again, you're right. By the time we get to retirement, now all of a sudden you're told, well, you don't need to save that money anymore. You got to spend it. This is what you've saved that money for that entire life, to enjoy the retirement you've got. But making that switch after possibly 40 years in the workforce is not easy. You've always had a paycheck coming in, and you've always been able to spend that way and put money away if that's the case. Now, all of a sudden, that same paycheck's not coming the same way. Trying to get your mind around saying, okay, well, yeah, maybe I should be starting to spend some of this money that I saved for my retirement is a harder concept. I mean, you may be living the same lifestyle, and if things don't change, then that's great. But again, the emotional change, or the emotional scenario of trying to get that change over, is not an easy one. It's not just flipping a switch. You can't undo 40 years worth of savings and all of a sudden just start spending it. I mean, I'm sure there are a few people out there, but it's not the majority of us. So that's really a concept we got to look at, isn't it?
Well, you're building routines, you're building habits, and all of that is kind of geared towards saving, right? So undoing that is quite difficult. And there's some data to back it up here. There was a study done by the Employee Benefit Research Institute, EBRI. So they looked at following American study, but after retirement, the 2 decades after retirement, what happens and how do they spend their funds? And this was published in 2018. And we'll pull up some of the findings here, Kevin. It kind of backs up what we thought, is that really people don't spend all the money. They do all the savings and they spend some, but really not all of it. And counterintuitively, it actually doesn't really matter the level of wealth. Like, they looked at different asset levels, and across the board, the findings were similar, that people really weren't spending all of their savings. So a couple of the insights here of this particular study, they looked at folks that had assets of 200,000 or less, excluding the house. So just looking at the savings and investments. And over 18 years after retirement, they spent down 25%. So they still had 150 grand left over after 2 decades. And we went from that 200 to 500,000 of non-house assets, 27% were spent. Over $500,000 non-house assets, 12% spent in the first 2 decades. And of course, the money's invested, so it's growing. So that's part of the equation. But still, the primary finding here is that people really aren't spending all of their savings in retirement. And I think this relates very much to the challenge we just talked about, is that emotional shift to get out of the habit of saving into the habit of spending is very, very difficult. But a couple of tips. The first one you already mentioned, Kevin, is if you're enjoying life, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's a big factor to deal with. I mean, if all of a sudden you're in retirement and the lifestyle that you were living before is still the same lifestyle you're living now, and there's no problems, then just keep living that same lifestyle. You really don't have anything to worry about along those lines. And I go, again, on that previous slide that you mentioned, I mean, I know the same way. I like looking at a certain level of money in my bank account. And if that goes down, I don't like looking at that. Even while I'm working, I don't like looking at that. So in retirement, I won't like looking at it either. So that's why you'll tend to be a little more conservative maybe with some things. But as we mentioned, if you're enjoying life, it's not a big deal. You can continue to do the same things you're doing forward. But if you're not enjoying life that way, Clint, what do we have to deal with then?
Yeah, that's a different situation. So if things are going fine, you're not cutting back, you're feeling like you're enjoying life, and you just feel better when there's 20 grand in the bank account, regardless of if you need the 20 grand, you just feel better when it's there. Well, then just do that. Like, if it's working for you, keep doing it. The issue is if it's not working, if you feel you're cutting back, you're avoiding things in retirement, you're doing that out of fear of outliving your money. Well, that's where the problem sets in. That's where we really have to look at the financial plan, and you should make sure you have a plan, go through the details, and that process can help alleviate some of the fears. Okay, it's actually okay if I spend some of this money. It looks like I'm on track and I should be just fine. So that emotional challenge, very big. Often we see it for clientele. Having that financial plan can help alleviate some of that emotional burden, emotional struggle with shifting over to the spending mode. A third unexpected challenge has to do with how we identify ourselves, right? Often when you're working, maybe your role and what you do, your responsibilities, it's all kind of part of your overall identity. And then you retire, all of that goes away, and you've got to go through a shift and kind of find a new structure, a new role. And that could very much be a struggle in retirement.
It is. I mean, that's a big factor. I mean, for your entire life frame up to this point, you've either been work guy or you've been dad guy, or maybe if you're involved with kids sports, you're coach guy, whatever the case may be. You have a certain identity that you deal with. And all of a sudden, when you've been dealing with work and maybe you're the financial guy for a while and you hit retirement, well, you're still thinking of yourself as financial guy. And, somebody else now is dealing with all your clientele or things along those lines. That's something that's hard to overcome for some people. It's okay, well, now I'm in retirement. I don't have to deal with this. And, trying to get that mindset switch to being, okay, I'm a retiree. I should be enjoying life to do this. I'm now becoming the guy on the golf course, or I'm now the guy that's, doing more charity work. It's not an easy switch for a lot of people. You've been so used to, and especially as you mentioned before, if you've been running your own business, trying to get out of that identity now to just say, well, okay, well, I either don't own the business or somebody else is running it. It's not an easy scenario to do it. And there's struggles trying to get over that and say, okay, well, now I'm into retirement mode and things along those lines. And there's a whole bunch of backing on this as well, isn't there, Clint?
Well, there is some data, and we'll get into it just a second here, but 2 quick anecdotes, just dealing with a lot of retirees that I've seen, and you hit one already. If there's lots of responsibility, lots of identity wrapped in with work, it's hard to undo that. You can feel lost a little bit in retirement. And then also, if you retire early, often we get this kind of mindset, if I retire early, life is going to be fantastic. I'll retire at 50 or 55. And then reality doesn't quite meet expectations because all your friends and family are probably still working. So you could be the only one on the golf course, right? So again, it's kind of handling that transition. And it really has to do with expectations and whether or not it's meeting up with reality. And we'll go through a couple of data points here that kind of back it up. The first is actually, who's a sociologist. He did this decades ago. Is his model of retirement adjustments. He had 6 different steps. You can see them laid out on the slide. And then what we're going to dig into builds on that. It's Ritz and Mutran. They did a study in 2004 building on Ashley's model. They only used 5 stages, but they actually followed people around. They did ask some questions and dig into the data, and this was part of their findings. And you can see this positive attitudes towards retirement. You can see how it changes in the first couple of years, right? You get that honeymoon phase where everything looks fantastic, and then boom, you get hit with some disenchantment. Reality doesn't quite meet expectations. Your view of retirement drops significantly, and then eventually you find a new role, a new structure, kind of a new routine, if you will, and you find that more stable phase of retirement. Is this matching what you think as well, Kevin?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, actually, the funny thing is that there are actually a lot more retirees that go through this than you think. I mean, I've had a variety of my clients where, depending on whether it was winter or whether it was summer when they retired, if they retired in summer, they're, out to the cottage all summer. They don't have to worry about coming back. It's more of a 3-month holiday, maybe even 4 months. And then, everything's glorious. Or if it's in winter and they've taken down south, same sort of scenario, all of a sudden they hit that 6-month point and they've gone back to work of some format, whether it was the job they had for, a day a week, or they've looked for something new to help out with 10 or 12 hours, anything to keep busy, because they've hit that point where, okay, retirement lasted that great 6 months, but now what do I do? And it's going to take another 6 months for you to figure out exactly where you got to be and how your retirement's going to play. So yeah, that downward slide, perfectly meant. And as you've seen on the backside, even when it comes back, it's never as high as the pre-retirement that we think of, because everybody's so anticipating it beforehand. When you finally get into it and finally get to that adjustment, you're going to have that nice level of positivity, but it may not be as high as what the anticipation was before you hit there.
Yeah, anticipation, expectations, that's really what's coming into play here, and how we handle that adjustment. And like you talked about, that first phase, often part of that anticipation is it's like a permanent vacation, right? We love when we go on vacation when we're working because it's a break from the office, but doing that permanently, we find, well, that doesn't quite always work out.
That's right.
Reality and expectations don't necessarily meet there. But 2 quick tips to help with this third unexpected challenge in retirement. One, it's really just to recognize retirement can be a change. Some folks, it's very smooth. There is no big issue. For others, it can be a life-changing event. So the first step is really just to kind of change how we think about it and appreciate it can be a big event for some folks.
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you're leaving or if you're moving somewhere, you know what that's like, going from one city to another, or if you've switched jobs. These are all life-changing things. Going to retirement's the same way. But the other tip is also start early, as opposed to just, and I've had clients before, they're working all the way up to that last day, and that's the anticipation. I got the calendar countdown for 30 days, and this is what's going to happen. What are you doing in retirement? Well, at this point, I don't know. Make sure you plan that ahead of time. Know what you're dealing with. Know whether you want to go full-time or part-time retirement or semi-retirement, as it were, and have those sort of activities, charities, or any other events that you want dealt with. So starting early, always nice. Don't do it the last day. It just never works out quite as well.
Yeah, and for those that, in my view, if they're kind of running their own business, very much involved, sometimes a phased approach is best, as opposed to just cold turkey. You sell the company and you're out the door. Maybe there's a way you can, work 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and kind of tiptoe your way into it. That often helps with the adjustment process as well. So that we did that quickly. 3 unexpected challenges of retirement. If you got questions on retirement or really any other financial item, let us know. Reach out to us. Please go to the website, chatwithclintonandkevin.com. We'd love to hear from you. Fill in the form and we'll get back to you right away with a few answers. Any parting comments for the folks, Kevin?
All I would say is if you have questions about your retirement beforehand, call us. We're more than happy to take a look at it and see if we can help out in any way. Other than that, we've covered the 3 unexpected challenges. We'll have more for you coming up soon.
Take care.